Hi, welcome to the Louie File. Today I wanted to talk with you for a moment about sin and how much freedom from sin is available to us. You know, this seems to be a topic that keeps coming up over and over again, and I think it's an important one, but I think it takes a viewpoint change. Let me just start here in Matthew. Let's see, Matthew 19. There's a story about the rich young ruler that comes to Jesus, you know, wanting to be saved, and he tells him to keep the commandments. And the young ruler goes, "Well, I've kept those since I was a child." Anyway, the end of that conversation, the disciples look at Jesus, and Jesus says it's pretty much impossible for a rich man to enter. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom. And the apostles, or Peter at that time, disciples, they were like, well, who can be saved? And they're astonished. It says, then who can be saved? In Matthew 19:26, and looking at them, Jesus said to them, with people this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And that's what I wanted you to see today, is with God all things are possible. And what does that mean, all things, right? Well, let's think about this for a minute. I got a few places I wanted to share with you. In John chapter 8, there's the story of the woman who was caught in adultery. And if you look at that, of course, most of you probably know the story, but Jesus ends up letting her go free by telling the accusers, he says, which of you is without sin? The first one without sin, throw your stone. And they all dropped their rocks and they went away one by one, from the oldest to the youngest. And Jesus found himself standing there alone with the woman. And it says in John 8:10, straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go, from now on, sin no more." What? Sin no more? What do you mean, sin no more? I mean, most people I know say we're sinners, saved by grace. I mean, we're sinners. Basically, the core makeup of our being, even though we're saved and forgiven, we're sinners. So that means that we're always going to sin. Basically, there's no escaping it. You might as well settle into it, get used to it. You know, a lot of people read Romans chapter 7, the Apostle Paul's great conflict in that chapter, as being the destiny of all believers, as though that's the way our life is going to be, so you might as well just get used to the struggle against it, and there's no real victory. Jesus tells this woman here to go. He doesn't condemn her. He says, go and sin no more. So the big question is he telling her to do something that's impossible? Why would Jesus tell her to go and sin no more if it wasn't possible? Now, some people might say, well, he's saying to her, go and stop doing this specific thing. But then my question would be, if she could stop doing this specific thing, could she not also stop doing many other specific things that we call sin? All right, so then let's look back. I guess I should have done this in order. If you look back in John 5, you see a story of a man that was laying by the pool that had been unable to walk for like 38 years. I mean, for years and years he had not been walking. And Jesus basically asked him, do you want to get well? Because it didn't appear that he really did. And so he eventually told him, he said, pick up your pallet and walk. So the man got up and walked off. So in verse 14, Jesus finds this man in the temple. And it says in John 5:14, it says, afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you. Do not sin anymore. Something worse might happen to you. Once again, why would Jesus tell this man to stop sinning or sin no more if it wasn't available? Now remember, Jesus made a pretty amazing statement in Matthew 19. He said, with man it's impossible, but with God all things are possible. So, we're jumping back and forth. If you look back in John chapter 8 again, Jesus goes on to have this lesson to these Jewish religious leaders of his day. In John 8, verse 34 through 36, Jesus says, to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son does remain forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." Free. Well, he's talking about sin, right? He says right here, he says, everyone who commits a sin is a slave to sin. But he's saying, if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. Free from what? Well, sin. Are you kidding me? Jesus himself said all things are possible with God. He tells the man that couldn't walk, go stop sinning or something worse could happen to you. He tells the woman caught in adultery, he says, where are your accusers? He says, I don't condemn you, go and sin no more. And right here in John 8:34 through 36, he's telling us and anyone that's standing around him at this point that if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. This is exactly what the Apostle Paul picked up on when he's talking in Romans 6. He tells us in Romans 6 that those of us who have been baptized into Christ have been baptized into his death. We've been joined with him in his death, burial, and resurrection. Now we walk in new life. So in Romans 6, he's telling us exactly what Jesus said here. Romans 6, verse 6 and 7, he says, knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. See, that's what he's talking about back in John 8. He said if you commit a sin, you're a slave to sin. But he who the Son sets free is free indeed. For he who has died is freed from sin. Wow, are you kidding? Freed from sin. So then Romans 6, 12 and 13 tells us, therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body so that you obey its lusts. And do not go on presenting the members of your body to sin as instruments of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. So see, you've been set free from sin, so stop offering yourself up to it. See yourself as free from it and walk in that freedom. Now lots of people say, well now Louie, you can't be telling me that you can have sinless perfection. Are you telling me that we can stop sinning altogether? Well, that's not exactly what I'm saying, is it? What I'm saying is that sin shall no longer be your master. No longer be your master. That means as a lost man in Adam, dead in trespasses and sins, that's all you could do. Even the good that you were doing ended up being sin. But now, as a new creature, placed into Christ in his death, burial, and resurrection, now we have died to sin, we've died to Adam, we have died to all that stuff. So now we stop presenting ourselves to it, to obey it. See, we walk after the Spirit, we walk in the Spirit, and we will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. That's what the answer has always been. That's always the answer. Focus your attention on Christ, the author and finisher of your faith, and with God all things are possible. So my question to you to think about is, when Jesus was crucified and buried and raised back, how much freedom from sin was offered to us because of that act, because of that one act of righteousness by Jesus himself? How much freedom is available through that? I just pray that you walk in ever-increasing freedom in Christ, that you would just walk more and more in the light, and that you would be more and more free in Him. I hope this helps you today. Thank you for watching the Louie File, and I will see you the next time. See you later.